You have probably pulled them out of the ground and thrown them away. The ones that push up through your patio cracks, take over your flower beds, show up uninvited in the lawn every single spring. Most people see weeds and reach for the gloves. What they do not realize is that some of the most documented antimicrobial plants in human history are growing right outside their door right now, for free. Soldiers packed these plants into open wounds before antibiotics existed. Physicians prescribed them for centuries before clinical trials were invented. And modern researchers keep running studies that arrive at the same conclusion. These plants actually work. Stay with us for number 4 on this list. It contains a compound whose mechanism against drug-resistant bacteria has attracted serious attention from researchers who study antibiotic resistance specifically. And number 1 has been falsely blamed for a condition it does not cause for 50 years. While its actual antimicrobial research profile has been quietly accumulating in scientific literature the entire time. 20 plants. Let's get into it. Number 1. Elderflower. The flower that makes one of the world's most beloved cordials and that contains a compound inhibiting neuraminidase by the same mechanism as Tamiflu, the antiviral drug that costs over $100 per course of treatment. Sambucus nigra produces its cream-white flower clusters in late spring, weeks before the berries that most people associate with medicinal elderberry. The flowers contain quercetin, kaempferol, and rutin, with documented anti-inflammatory and antihistamine effects. But the antiviral story is the one that surprises researchers most. European studies have found elderflower extracts inhibit neuraminidase, the enzyme that influenza viruses use to break free from infected cells and spread to new ones. Block neuraminidase and you contain the infection. That is the mechanism of oseltamivir, sold as Tamiflu. The elderflower was doing this before the pharmaceutical existed. The flowers also contain significant vitamin C and the quercetin that inhibits histamine release from mast cells, addressing the inflammatory component of respiratory infections simultaneously. The preparation detail that matters. Neuraminidase-inhibiting compounds in elderflower are heat-sensitive. Steep in water below 90 degrees Celsius, covered for 7 minutes. Not a full rolling boil. The cordial tradition got the temperature right intuitively. The window is only a few weeks each May. The people who knew this picked the flowers. The people who did not knew only the berries. Number 2 belongs to the same plant family as a compound that won a Nobel Prize. Most people who walk past it every spring have no idea that the molecular family it contains is the same one that changed malaria treatment worldwide. Number 2. Mugwort. From the Artemisia genus, the same family that produced artemisinin, the Nobel Prize-winning anti-malarial compound, with volatile oils documented to have antibacterial and antifungal activity against respiratory and gastrointestinal pathogens. Artemisia vulgaris grows as an invasive weed in roadsides and disturbed ground across North America and Europe. In 2015, Chinese scientist Tu Youyou received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for discovering artemisinin, extracted from Artemisia annua, a close botanical relative of mugwort. That became the basis for the only effective treatment for drug-resistant malaria worldwide. The compound works by releasing free radicals specifically inside the pathogen's cells without harming the host, a selectivity that is the holy grail of antimicrobial chemistry. Mugwort itself contains lower concentrations of artemisinin-related compounds than its medicinal relative, alongside volatile oils with documented antibacterial and antifungal activity against candida and common respiratory pathogens. Traditional Chinese medicine has used Artemisia vulgaris continuously for over 2,000 years. Traditional European herbalism used it under the name Mother of Herbs for digestive and antimicrobial complaints. They arrived at the same plant independently for overlapping reasons. The mechanism behind those reasons was explained by a Nobel Prize. Most people's response to mugwort is to spray it with herbicide. Number 3 has been wrongly convicted of causing hay fever for half a century. While it was being blamed, its actual antimicrobial research profile was building in scientific literature. The plant that most people believe triggers their allergies does not, but it does contain compounds that disrupt bacterial biofilms, the protective structures that make bacteria 50 times more antibiotic resistant. Number 3. Goldenrod. Falsely blamed for late summer hay fever for 50 years while ragweed was the actual culprit, and containing quercetin that disrupts bacterial biofilm formation, formerly included in German Commission E monographs for urinary tract health. Solidago species bloom in brilliant gold across fields and roadsides in late summer and early autumn. Most Americans blame goldenrod for their late summer hay fever. The actual culprit is ragweed, which blooms at the same time but produces lightweight airborne pollen. Goldenrod's pollen is too heavy to become airborne. It has been falsely accused and systematically ignored for decades. The actual pharmacology includes quercetin and kaempferol, two flavonoids with documented ability to disrupt bacterial biofilm formation. Biofilms are the protective matrices that bacteria construct around themselves to resist antibiotic penetration. A bacterium inside a well-organized biofilm can withstand antibiotic concentrations 50 times higher than the same bacterium in isolation. Anything that disrupts biofilm formation is significant in the context of antibiotic resistance. German Commission E has included goldenrod in official botanical medicine monographs for urinary tract support. Traditional use across European, Native American, and Asian medicine consistently pointed to the same applications. 3 independent medical traditions, same plant, same uses. Meanwhile, the Western world has been spraying it with herbicide and blaming it for a condition it does not cause. Number 4. Creeping Charlie, the most medically researched weed on this entire list, with a research profile spanning over 40 years across anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antioxidant, and neuroprotective categories, and containing ursolic acid with documented activity against anaerobic bacteria in conditions where conventional antibiotics cannot reach. Glechoma heteracea grows low to the ground, with small scalloped leaves that smell faintly of mint when crushed, and tiny purple flowers in spring. Lawn care companies listed alongside dandelion as a primary broadleaf herbicide target. What they do not mention is that the primary bioactive compounds in Creeping Charlie, rosmarinic acid, ursolic acid, and flavonoids including luteolin and apigenin, have been studied continuously for over 40 years across multiple biomedical research categories. Rosmarinic acid alone has been studied in the context of Alzheimer's disease for its potential to inhibit the formation of amyloid beta plaques. Ursolic acid has been examined specifically for activity against anaerobic bacteria, the organisms that thrive in oxygen-depleted environments, in dead tissue, in deep wounds where conventional antibiotics that require oxygen-dependent bacterial metabolism to function effectively simply cannot reach. The Anglo-Saxons called this plant alehoof and used it to preserve and clarify ale before hops. Traditional European herbalism used it for respiratory congestion, sinus inflammation, and as a bitter digestive tonic. Nicholas Culpeper, the 17th century English herbalist whose work shaped European plant medicine for generations, described it as a general remedy for the whole body. Modern phytochemistry is beginning to explain why. The most comprehensively studied weed on this list is the one people spray with herbicide every April without a second thought. Number 5. Self-heal, earning that name across unrelated cultures on multiple continents simultaneously and containing compounds that laboratory studies have found show inhibitory effects against herpes simplex virus, influenza, and HIV through interference at the cellular entry stage. Prunella vulgaris grows low in lawns and meadows with small purple flower spikes. Medieval surgeons called it carpenter's herb because it was applied to tool wounds on woodworking sites as a first response. Traditional Chinese medicine, European herbal traditions, and multiple Native American nations all used it for wounds, sore throats, and infections, independently, without contact. The research that has genuinely surprised scientists centers on antiviral activity. Laboratory studies have found that self-heal extracts show inhibitory effects against herpes, simplex virus, influenza, and HIV, with the proposed mechanism being interference with viral replication at the cellular entry stage, a target that is increasingly important as pharmaceutical antiviral resistance develops. Prunellin, a polysaccharide in self-heal, appears to interfere specifically with bacterial adhesion to mucosal tissue, addressing the earliest stage of infection before it can establish itself. Topically, self-heal accelerates wound closure and reduces mouth ulcer healing time in clinical studies. Brew fresh or dried herb as a tea for sore throats and immune support. Crush fresh leaves and apply directly to minor wounds. A plant called self-heal, earning that name across cultures that never met each other, is a signal worth paying attention to. Number 6. burdock root, whose ursolic acid has documented activity against anaerobic bacteria in oxygen-depleted environments like deep tissue wounds, and that traditional Asian and European medicine used specifically for infections that other treatments failed to resolve. Arctium lapa is the plant whose hooked seed heads inspired the invention of Velcro. The root is considerably more interesting than the burr. Burdock root contains ursolic acid, the same fat-soluble compound found in creeping Charlie, at concentrations that laboratory research has examined specifically for activity against anaerobic bacteria, the organisms responsible for the most serious deep tissue infections, the ones that conventional antibiotics delivered through the bloodstream struggle to reach because the infection site lacks the oxygen those antibiotics require. The root also contains chlorogenic acid and quercetin, with confirmed anti-inflammatory and hepatoprotective effects. Traditional herbalism in both Asia and Europe used burdock root specifically for infections that would not resolve: deep skin conditions, persistent abscesses, slow-healing wounds. In Japan, burdock root, called gobo, is a standard culinary vegetable eaten daily. The consistency of use over generations in a population with notably low rates of certain chronic conditions is the kind of epidemiological signal that traditional medicine observes over centuries. The root can be harvested in autumn of its first year, scrubbed, sliced thin, and cooked in stir-fries and soups. The flavor is earthy, slightly sweet, with a satisfying crunch. Think of it as the plant that reached into the kind of infection that conventional medicine struggles with, and has been doing so for a very long time. Number 7. Sheep sorrel, the tart weed with arrow-shaped leaves growing in your worst soil, containing vitex and flavonoids that have attracted the attention of oncology researchers, and one of 4 plants in a traditional formula studied across multiple decades for anti-tumor effects. Rumex acidicella grows in poor acidic soil, thin lawns, and disturbed ground. It is small, low-growing, with arrow-shaped leaves and reddish flower spikes. Most people who notice it at all think it is a grass. Chew a leaf and you know immediately it is not. The sharp lemony sourness comes from oxalic acid and signals a chemistry worth understanding. Sheep sorrel contains vitamin C and antioxidant compounds including hypericin, and vitex and flavonoids, studied for anti-inflammatory and cardiovascular protective effects. The research that placed sheep sorrel on the radar of oncology scientists is specific. It is one of 4 plants in the traditional formula called Essiac, developed by Canadian nurse Renee Cais in the early 20th century, based on an Ojibwe herbal tradition, and studied across multiple decades for potential anti-tumor effects. Multiple laboratory studies on sheep sorrel extracts have found cytotoxic activity against certain cancer cell lines. Compounds in the plant appear to interfere with cancer cell proliferation under controlled conditions. That research does not constitute clinical proof yet, but it has generated serious and sustained scientific attention from researchers who take traditional herbal formulas seriously as starting points. As food, the leaves add a tart, refreshing flavor to salads and soups. The weed growing in your worst soil has been on the desk of cancer researchers for decades. Number 8. Hawthorn, whose oligomeric proanthocyanidins are 50 times more potent than vitamin C as antioxidants, formally approved by German and European regulatory bodies for cardiovascular support, and containing antimicrobial compounds studied against respiratory and gastrointestinal pathogens. Crataegus species produce those small red berries called haws every autumn in hedgerows across the northern hemisphere. Most people walk past them without a second thought. The berries contain oligomeric proanthocyanidins, OPC, with antioxidant capacity 50 times higher than vitamin C in laboratory measurements. Multiple clinical trials have confirmed hawthorn berry extracts improve cardiac function in mild to moderate heart failure, and German and European regulatory bodies have formally approved hawthorn preparations for cardiac support based on that evidence. The antimicrobial story runs alongside the cardiovascular one. The flavonoids in hawthorn berries have demonstrated inhibitory activity against a range of bacterial and fungal pathogens in laboratory research, with particular interest in respiratory and gastrointestinal organisms. The flowers of hawthorn, available in spring weeks before the berries, contain different flavonoids with documented anxiolytic and anti-inflammatory activity through separate mechanisms from the autumn fruit. Traditional European medicine used hawthorn for both heart conditions and infectious disease. not knowing the mechanisms were distinct but observing that the plant addressed both. Eat the berries fresh, in jams, or dried for tea. Harvest flowers in spring for a gentle cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory preparation. Think of it as the hedgerow pharmacy that has been offering two completely different medicine cabinets from the same plant across different seasons. Number 9. White dead nettle, the nettle that does not sting, carrying much of the antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory profile of its stinging relative without the painful consequence, and almost universally overlooked because it looks similar to a plant most people already avoid. Lamium album produces whorls of white flowers on upright stems and looks enough like stinging nettle to make people cautious, but lacks the stinging hairs entirely, making it safe to handle with bare hands at any time. The irony is significant. The plant most people give a wide berth because of visual similarity to stinging nettle is actually the version that asks nothing of you in exchange for its benefits. White dead nettle contains tannins, saponins, mucilage, and flavonoids with anti-inflammatory properties documented in laboratory research. The antimicrobial activity against gram-positive bacteria and Candida species has been confirmed in multiple studies. Traditional European use treated white dead nettle as a reliable spring green for food, a tea herb for female reproductive health, and a topical preparation for skin inflammation and wound healing. The leaves taste mild and slightly earthy when cooked. Blanched and sautéed with garlic and olive oil, they are genuinely good eating. White dead nettle produces flowers through much of the growing season, offering a long harvest window. The plant that most people have spent years avoiding because they thought it would sting them was offering its benefits freely the entire time. Number 10. Ground elder, the gout remedy that medieval monks planted deliberately, containing chlorogenic acid and caffeic acid with anti-inflammatory and diuretic effects that address uric acid accumulation through the same mechanism as modern pharmaceutical gout treatments. Agopodium podagraria is one of the most despised garden weeds in Europe, spreading aggressively through underground rhizomes, reappearing from the smallest fragment of root left in the soil, and once established being extraordinarily difficult to remove. The reason it is so widespread in Old English and European gardens is precisely the reason people now struggle to eliminate it. Medieval monks planted it there deliberately. Ground elder was cultivated specifically for treating gout, the painful inflammatory condition caused by uric acid crystal accumulation in joints. Monks eating rich diets by the standards of their time were prone to gout, and they grew ground elder because it worked. The plant contains chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and several flavonoids with anti-inflammatory and diuretic effects confirmed in laboratory research. The diuretic action helps clear excess uric acid through the kidneys, exactly the mechanism modern pharmaceutical gout treatments use, through a different chemical pathway. Young leaves in early spring before flowering have a fresh, slightly herbal flavor similar to parsley. Eat them raw in salads, blanched as a pot herb, or dried for tea. After flowering, the leaves become bitter. The spring harvest window is the critical detail. A weed that gardeners spend weeks trying to eradicate was planted by intelligent, medically literate people who understood exactly what they had. It became ineradicable precisely because it was too useful to plant carelessly. Number 11. Cleavers. The sticky weed that covers you in seeds every time you walk through a hedge, used as a lymphatic tonic across European, Native American, and Ayurvedic traditions simultaneously, with compounds that have demonstrated diuretic and anti-inflammatory effects supporting lymphatic drainage. Gallium aparine is one of the most universally recognized weeds in the temperate world and one of the most consistently underestimated medically. The lymphatic system is the body's drainage network, the parallel circulatory system carrying immune cells, clearing metabolic waste and moving fluid out of tissues. When lymphatic flow is sluggish, the consequences appear as swollen glands, persistent puffiness, chronic low-grade immune issues, and slow recovery from illness. Cleavers has been used specifically as a lymphagogue, a substance that stimulates lymphatic movement and drainage across European, Native American, and Ayurvedic traditions for centuries. 3 unconnected traditions identifying the same plant for the same application is the kind of cross-cultural convergence that points toward a real physiological effect. The plant contains tannins, flavonoids, and iridoid glycosides that have demonstrated diuretic and anti-inflammatory effects in research supporting its traditional lymphatic applications. Cold-pressed juice from fresh plant material is the most potent preparation. Run fresh stems and leaves through a juicer or blend and strain through cloth. Tea from dried herb works, but with reduced effect. The traditional spring harvest aligns with when the body has accumulated the most metabolic waste from winter inactivity and needs drainage most. Number 12. Red clover. The pink-purple pom-pom flowers bobbing in every unmowed lawn, containing isoflavones with documented activity against Helicobacter pylori, the bacterium responsible for most stomach ulcers, alongside documented reductions in menopausal bone loss of 45% over 1 year in a double-blind clinical trial. Trifolium pratense is one of the most familiar plants in temperate lawns and meadows, mowed over continuously without a second thought. The flowers contain isoflavones, compounds with documented antimicrobial activity against H. pylori, the bacterium that the medical establishment spent decades insisting could not survive in the stomach, before Barry Marshall proved otherwise by drinking a petri dish of it and giving himself an ulcer. H. pylori is now understood to be responsible for most cases of gastric ulcers and is a risk factor for gastric cancer. Red clover isoflavones show inhibitory activity against H. pylori in laboratory conditions, a finding that sits alongside the extensively documented effects on menopausal symptoms and bone density. A double-blind study found red clover isoflavone supplementation over 1 year reduced spinal bone loss by 45% compared to placebo, one of the most significant dietary interventions ever documented for postmenopausal bone density. Red clover supplements sell for $15 to $30 per bottle. The source plant is flowering in your lawn right now. Dry the flowers and brew as a mildly sweet tea. The plant and the pharmaceutical are the same chemistry. Number 13. Common mallow. Producing a mucilaginous gel that coats the digestive tract and respiratory lining like a physical bandage, with antimicrobial compounds studied against a range of pathogens and eaten as a staple vegetable in the Middle East for thousands of years. Malva sylvestris grows in vacant lots, roadsides, and disturbed ground across most of the temperate world. The mucilaginous polysaccharides in its leaves dissolve in water to form a thick, slippery gel that coats the lining of the mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, and intestines with a physical protective layer, allowing inflamed tissue to heal underneath it while simultaneously creating an environment less hospitable to bacterial adhesion. This is not a pharmacological anti-inflammatory in the conventional sense. It is a mechanical barrier that combines with direct antimicrobial compounds. Mallow has demonstrated activity against Staphylococcus aureus, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Candida albicans in laboratory studies. The protein content of the leaves, approximately 21% by dry weight, makes it exceptional among leafy greens. In Egypt, mallow is malakia, the national dish, eaten for thousands of years by a population that did not have the word medicinal plant, but understood intuitively what the plant did. Traditional medicine across the Middle East, North Africa, and Mediterranean Europe used mallow for every condition involving inflamed mucous membranes. The science has confirmed the mechanism. The plant is growing in the lot next door. Number 14. Wood sorrel, the lemon-flavored ground cover that looks like a shamrock, containing oxalic acid with antimicrobial properties, vitamin C in concentrations comparable to citrus, and attracting the attention of fine dining chefs who pay foragers for the same plant most gardeners remove without tasting. Oxalis species grow in shaded garden edges and lawn corners, small heart-shaped leaves in clusters of 3, sometimes with a purple tint, small yellow flowers. The taste stops everyone the first time, intensely bright and lemony, like citrus compressed into a single leaf. The oxalic acid responsible for that flavor has documented antimicrobial properties against several foodborne pathogens in laboratory studies. The vitamin C content is significant, comparable per gram to citrus fruit, in a plant that grows wild and costs nothing. Traditional uses across Native American, European, and Asian medicine consistently featured wood sorrel as a cooling herb for fever, a thirst quencher, and a treatment for digestive discomfort, all consistent with the antimicrobial and vitamin C content. Fine dining restaurants in New York and Chicago currently pay specialty foragers for wood sorrel because its flavor profile is irreplaceable in high-end culinary contexts. The same plant is growing in the shaded corner of your garden that you gave up on. Note, the oxalic acid content means wood sorrel is excellent as a garnish, salad addition, or small daily inclusion. Eaten in moderation, not by the bowlful. People with a history of kidney stones should avoid regular large quantities. Number 15. Chickweed, containing saponins and phytosterols that reduce itching and inflammation at the tissue level without the skin thinning that prolonged hydrocortisone use causes, and growing actively through winter when almost every other medicinal plant is dormant. Stellaria media grows low to the ground with thin, sprawling stems, tiny oval leaves, and small white star-shaped flowers that appear almost year-round in mild climates. It covers bare soil quickly and disappears in hot, dry weather. The chemistry behind its traditional reputation for skin relief is documented. Saponins and phytosterols have confirmed anti-inflammatory and antipruritic effects, meaning they actively reduce itching at the tissue level. Traditional herbalists applied chickweed to eczema, psoriasis flares, hives, insect bites, and minor burns for generations. The comparison worth making is with hydrocortisone cream, the standard pharmaceutical recommendation for most of these conditions. Hydrocortisone suppresses immune activity broadly, which helps short-term but causes skin thinning with prolonged use. Chickweed reduces local inflammatory activity without that trade-off. Crush fresh leaves and press directly onto irritated skin. For ongoing use, infuse dried chickweed in a carrier oil for 4 to 6 weeks, strain, and apply as needed. The plant is also edible, mild, pleasant, and excellent salad green. The fact that it grows most actively in late autumn and winter, when almost every other plant is dormant, means it is available precisely when viral seasons peak and immune support is most needed. Number 16. Dandelion, the most aggressively targeted weed in suburban lawn care and the most nutritionally complete and medically documented plant growing freely in the temperate world, whose leaves act as a natural diuretic that uniquely replaces the potassium it removes because the leaves themselves are extraordinarily rich in it. Taraxacum officinale. Entire product categories exist specifically to eliminate it. The plant being exterminated is one of the most comprehensively studied medicinal plants in the temperate world, with a research record spanning multiple continents and multiple centuries. The root contains compounds that stimulate bile production and improve bile flow from the gallbladder. The mechanism through which the liver moves processed material out of the body. A sluggish gallbladder is a sluggish elimination system, and dandelion root addresses that directly. The antimicrobial research is less famous but real. Dandelion extracts have shown activity against a range of bacterial pathogens, including H. pylori and drug-resistant Staphylococcus strains in laboratory conditions. The leaves act as a natural diuretic, one of the most studied plant-based diuretics available, without depleting potassium the way pharmaceutical diuretics do. The self-correcting mechanism, dandelion leaves replenish the potassium they promote excreting, because the leaves themselves contain more potassium than almost any cultivated green. No synthetic drug has managed to replicate this. Nutritionally more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium than milk by weight. Roast the roots for a coffee substitute, add young spring leaves to salads. The plant people spend money to kill has been keeping people healthy since before recorded history. Number 17. Purslane, the low-growing succulent spreading across garden beds every summer, containing the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids ever measured in a land plant, alongside melatonin in concentrations higher than most plant foods, and glutathione, the body's primary internal antioxidant. Portulaca oleracea, with its thick reddish stems and small paddle-shaped leaves, sprawls across garden beds and vegetable patches through summer, and most gardeners pull it immediately. Researchers studying it have a different reaction. Purslane contains the highest concentration of alpha-linolenic acid, the omega-3 essential fat, ever measured in a terrestrial plant. Some studies have found it delivers more omega-3s per gram than many species of fish. Omega-3 fatty acids are foundational to the management of chronic inflammation, the underlying driver of most conditions associated with modern lifestyle. The antimicrobial dimension. Purslane extracts have shown activity against E. coli, Salmonella, and Staphylococcus aureus in laboratory studies. The melatonin content, in concentrations higher than most plant foods tested, adds a sleep regulation dimension. The glutathione content adds the body's primary master antioxidant. Traditional medicine across the Middle East, India, and China used purslane consistently for inflammation, gut complaints, and as a general cooling and restorative food. All consistent with what the omega-3 and antioxidant content predicts. Eat it raw in salads, sauté lightly in olive oil with garlic, add to soups. The weed pulling itself out of your garden bed every week is one of the most nutritionally dense plants available anywhere. Number 18. Yarrow, named after Achilles who used it to treat his soldiers' wounds, simultaneously a hemostatic that stops bleeding and a vulnerary that heals wounds, the only common medicinal plant that reliably does both at the same time, with 2018 research showing efficacy against MRSA comparable to vancomycin. Achillea millefolium has one of the longest unbroken medicinal records of any plant. Soldiers across cultures carried dried yarrow specifically to pack into wounds for at least 2,000 years. The plant contains achyletin, a compound that measurably reduces bleeding time by promoting platelet aggregation, the mechanism that forms a clot. Modern laboratory studies have confirmed this is a real biochemical effect. But what separates yarrow from most medicinal plants is that it does two things simultaneously. It stops bleeding and promotes tissue repair at the same time. Most plants do one or the other. Yarrow does both, which is precisely why battlefield medicine valued it above almost everything else available. The 2018 research from the University of Thrace found that yarrow essential oil showed efficacy against methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA, in laboratory conditions comparable to vancomycin, one of the antibiotic treatments of last resort. The mechanism involves a combination of compounds working together that no isolated extract has fully replicated. Fresh, crushed leaves pressed onto a minor cut can, visibly slow bleeding within minutes. Strong yarrow tea can be used topically for wounds or taken internally for fever and gut inflammation. For anyone outdoors away from a medicine cabinet, knowing yarrow is practical knowledge with a track record measured in millennia. Number 19. Plantain. The flat, unremarkable plant with oval ribbed leaves growing in every compacted lawn and sidewalk crack, used medically on every continent where it grows, whose ointment outperformed standard pharmaceutical treatment on second-degree burns in a 2015 clinical trial. Plantigo major has been used medically on every continent where it grows, and it grows almost everywhere. When European settlers arrived in North America, it followed their trail so consistently that indigenous nations called it white man's footprint. Those same nations adopted it into their own medicine quickly, not out of curiosity, but because the results were obvious and fast. The leaves contain aucubin and allantoin, two compounds that actively reduce inflammatory signaling, slow minor bleeding, and inhibit bacterial growth. Those mechanisms are now well documented in laboratory research. What makes plantain genuinely remarkable is the speed. Crush a fresh leaf, press it onto a sting, bite or small cut, and swelling and discomfort ease within minutes. Not hours, minutes. That is active plant chemistry working directly on tissue at a pace that catches people off guard every time. A 2015 clinical trial found that plantain ointment outperformed standard pharmaceutical treatment on second-degree burns, a result that would turn heads for any botanical preparation at any price point. Plantain asks nothing of you. It grows in the worst soil, survives foot traffic, and shows up without being planted. The people who recognize it reach for it the moment something goes wrong with their skin. Number 20. Stinging nettle, the plant that attacks you first and heals you second, injecting histamine on contact and then measurably reducing histamine response when consumed internally. With root extracts proven in controlled trials for prostate health and leaf extracts studied for seasonal allergies. Urtica dioica. The first thing most people learn about stinging nettle is that it hurts. Brush against the leaves with bare skin, and within seconds you feel a sharp burning sting that lingers for hours. Tiny hollow needles on the leaf surface inject formic acid, histamine, and other compounds directly into the skin, which makes what nettle actually does inside the body all the more unexpected. The root extract has been studied specifically for benign prostatic hyperplasia, the prostate enlargement affecting a significant portion of men over 50. Multiple controlled trials have found nettle root measurably reduces urinary symptoms, improving flow and reducing nighttime bathroom visits in ways researchers describe as clinically meaningful. The leaves tell a different story, loaded with quercetin and other flavonoids with well-documented anti-inflammatory effects. Freeze-dried nettle leaf has been studied in randomized trials for seasonal allergies, reducing histamine response in a meaningful proportion of participants. The irony is not lost on researchers. A plant that injects histamine on contact reduces histamine response when consumed internally. Nutritionally, iron levels comparable to red meat, significant calcium, magnesium, and vitamin K, a complete amino profile unusual for any plant food. Blanch the leaves for 30 seconds in boiling water, and the sting is neutralized completely. Cook exactly like spinach. Soups, stews, sautéed in butter, stirred into eggs. Dried nettle makes a strong mineral-rich tea. The plant that taught you to keep your distance has been offering to help the whole time. 20 plants. All of them growing right now in backyards, sidewalks, empty lots, and fields. All of them dismissed. All of them documented. The knowledge was never lost. It was buried under decades of advertising, perfectly trimmed lawns, chemical weed killers, and a culture that started treating every wild plant like an enemy instead of asking why our ancestors protected them in the first place. Some of the most powerful plants on Earth are still growing for free all around us. People spray them, pull them, throw them away, not realizing they may be destroying the plants their great-grandparents once depended on to survive. If this video changed how you see the ground outside your door, hit the like button and subscribe. Drop in the comments which of these 20 is growing in your yard right now, and tell me what you want covered next. I will see you in the next one.